We'd like to welcome you tonight for this meeting to talk about proposed changes to the Braddock Road multimodal improvements, specifically at Wakefield Chapel and Danbury Forest Drive and Port Royal Road and the I-495 ramps. First, Supervisor Walkinshaw would like to lead off with some introductory remarks. Supervisor Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks everyone for joining tonight. I hope everyone's staying safe and dry. I wish we could have done this meeting in person, although maybe on a night like tonight, we're all happier to be home in our basements and home offices. But we have an important topic to cover, and let me just start by kind of setting the stage a little bit. As many of you know, my predecessor, Supervisor Cook, led an effort over several years with the help of a community task force to develop a plan to improve Braddock Road. And one of the things that was kind of exciting about it is the community itself, especially those of us who live in the Braddock Road corridor, really came together and said, we don't want to do what would traditionally be done. And traditionally what would be done in a situation like this would be to widen the road and add lanes. And we recognize, obviously, that would have had a negative impact on a lot of our neighborhoods, but also recognize that just widening the road would have simply drawn more traffic and more cars from other routes like 66. So the decision was made to, rather than widen the road, to make a series of improvements to intersections, which we'll go over briefly shortly, and make a series of pedestrian and bicycle improvements to what is right now a section of Braddock Road, which is pretty difficult to navigate if you're walking or bicycling. So the plan will add shared use paths that are contiguous, so you'll be able to travel the full stretch of this project on your bike, or if you're walking or running. An improved underpass at Accotink Creek, so it will be easier to go underneath Braddock Road for those of you who have used that underpass before, and a lot of critical safety improvements to the intersections up and down the corridor. So it is an exciting plan and project, and has had a lot of community support. And I want to thank specifically, I know some of the folks who served on the task force, many meetings, a lot of community outreach that went into developing this plan. I want to thank them, and as I mentioned, my predecessor, Supervisor Cook, for his work on it. But we're here tonight because we're really at a critical point in the project's life. And the risk is that if we don't make the right decisions at this point, we might not have an improvement project. And just to put that into context, the study that was conducted in 2018 looked at the no-build option, which is basically maintain the status quo as is. And that study showed that of the 13 intersections that are part of this project, from Ravensworth just inside the Beltway out to Guinea Road, 12 of those 13 intersections would be rated F in terms of level of service by 2040. So from my perspective, and I hope you all will agree, doing nothing is not an option. And where we are right now is that we have applied twice for funding to construct this project at a total cost of about $150 million. We've applied twice to state funding sources, and the staff will go through this in more detail. But we've been denied twice. And the reason is that this project hasn't been competitive enough in terms of the amount of congestion reduction achieved per dollar. So right now the project is too expensive relative to other projects around the state. And we could continue applying and being denied and applying and being denied. And each year we do that, we increase the likelihood that the project never happens. And I don't want to see that. So where we are right now is VDOT has suggested a couple of changes to the two intersections that Michael laid out. Those changes will achieve significant savings and reduce the phase 1 project cost from $74 million to $48 million, making us much more competitive and significantly increasing the likelihood of us getting funding for the project. So that's what we're here to do tonight, is present those updates and changes for your feedback. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your concerns and your questions and your thoughts. And I know we're going to take as many questions as we can after the presentation, but there will also be a survey available. If you're not able to ask a question, you can respond to the survey or submit your comments online, and we'll share all that information as we continue along with the presentation. But thank you all for joining us tonight. And Michael, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Walkinshaw. Before I introduce our next speaker, let me just go over some of the guidelines for tonight, just so everyone can get the most out of the meeting. Please note that the session may be recorded, and it may be shared on social media, something like YouTube. We ask that everyone hold their questions till the end of the presentation, and we'll be providing instructions on how to ask your questions after we're done with the presentation. We also encourage you to submit written comments and take the online survey like Supervisor Walkinshaw just mentioned. And details on that and how to do that will be provided at the end of the presentation as well. So I'd now like to introduce Tom Bishoni, who's Director of the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. Let's say a couple words before we begin the presentation. Tom?
Thank you, Michael. I'll be very brief. First of all, thanks to everyone participating. It looks like we have about 75 attendees tonight, so we definitely appreciate the interest in the project. And as Supervisor Walkinshaw has said, we have applied for funding for the project as was originally recommended by the task force on 2 occasions and have not received funding for it. Tonight's presentation will talk about 2 revisions to the original recommendation for the corridor that are in fact designed to make the project more competitive for funding. So as Michael mentioned, there will be several different opportunities for you to provide feedback, both through a survey and then also through written comment. And we will give you an opportunity for a question and answer at the end of the presentation. So Michael, I'm going to turn it back over to you, let you go through the presentation, and then we'll all be available for the Q&A at the end. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tom. So just a reminder, we'll hold questions till the end. Sorry, my light in my office goes out if I don't move around. We'll explain how you can ask your questions using the Q&A function on WebEx, and we'll also provide instructions to phone in questions if you're calling into the meeting. All right, so with that, I will start the presentation. Let me share my screen. Okay, well, thank you again for coming. Let's get through so we have time for questions. All right, for those of you not familiar, we did a study several years ago, and the study recommended a series of intersection and corridor improvements along Braddock Road. They go from Guinea to Ravensworth, like Supervisor Walkinshaw mentioned. They include intersection improvements, access management, which deals with intersection spacing and side street access, and bicycle and pedestrian paths on both sides of the road. There's improvements recommended at the 17 major intersections along the corridor shown here on our project map. So after we did the study, we worked closely with VDOT to discuss the best approach for implementation. VDOT agreed to implement the project. We felt they were better suited to do it because of the scale and complexity of the project. Some of those complexities include interchange modifications proposed at I-495 and potential new structures or structure and bridge impacts as proposed as part of the project. What VDOT's done so far is they've reviewed our study, including our concept plans and our traffic analysis. They've developed detailed cost estimates and initiated field survey and consultant procurement. We split the project into 2 phases, and this is mainly to help us manage the project implementation as well as help in obtaining funding. The preliminary design for both phases will be done concurrently, and we felt that was important because when we did the study, we found that the traffic analysis really needed to look at the entire corridor. So phase one is from Ravensworth Drive to Southampton. It includes the Ravensworth Drive improvements from Braddock to Greenfield. The updated cost estimate for that is $74 million. Phase two is the rest of the project from Southampton Drive to Humphreys Drive, which is west of Guinea Road. It includes planned improvements on Rolling Road and Berkeley Road, and the updated cost for that is $75 million. For those of you familiar with the study, you'll see that there's a dramatic increase in the cost estimates, and that's due to a combination of factors. Construction costs have increased very dramatically in recent years, as well as land acquisition costs. VDOT did look at our estimates, our concept plans in a lot more detail than we did with the study. And as a result, they've added some cost elements that weren't included in our study cost estimate. For example, one of those was a bridge over Long Branch Creek as part of the Danbury Forest Drive relocation to align it with Wakefield Chapel Road. As I mentioned, land acquisition costs increased as well, and utility relocations were not certain yet. Our study did not get into very much detail, so VDOT has a conservative estimate so that the estimate will include any potential utility relocations. On top of that, there's an inflation factor added. Our study estimate went to about 2019, so they've inflated to go to year 2026. Combining that with the higher construction estimate, that was a significant increase to the cost as well. And then finally, because of the dramatic rise in construction cost and the amount of actually large projects going on in the state and the region here, there's been labor shortages in the construction industry and market, which has also helped drive prices up and made it more volatile. So as a result, VDOT's been applying higher contingencies to planning level estimates at this stage on all projects statewide. We feel the estimate's conservative. We hope it'll go down as we get into detailed design, but we'll just have to wait and see. So the funding status right now is the county's allocated $11 million to the project. $5.5 million has been provided to VDOT for the 30% design phases for phases 1 and 2. As Supervisor Walkinshaw mentioned, we've applied for Smart Scale funding, which is a state source of funding in 2018. We also applied for NVTA, which is the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. We've applied for their regional funding for phases 1 and 2 in 2017 and 2018. All our applications have been unsuccessful. We're currently getting ready to apply for Smart Scale funding for phase 1 this month. Those applications are due August 17th. As part of the Smart Scale process, VDOT has implemented a pilot project. What that does is looks at smart scale projects that had a relatively high benefit score, but were less competitive overall because of a relatively high cost. Braddock Road Phase 1 is one of 4 projects statewide selected to be evaluated. And with that, VDOT's consultant, ATCS, has recommended proposed design changes to bring costs down at Wakefield Chapel, Danbury Forest Drive, and Port Royal Road and the I-495 ramps. The funding landscape has really changed since we did the study. Funding sources are much more competitive and they're required to go through a scoring process. So our projects are scored against other projects statewide. The goal of these proposed changes is to decrease the cost without negatively impacting the benefits. We feel these changes will maintain the benefits and actually increase safety while decreasing the cost. As a result, we think that it'll significantly improve our chances to get funding with this Smart Scale application. The total estimated savings from these changes that we'll review tonight for phase 1 is $26 million. All right, with that, I'll start going through the review of the proposed changes at Wakefield Chapel, Danbury Forest, and the I-495 ramps and Port Royal Road. First, I'll go over what we proposed with the study and then describe what the differences are with the new proposal on the table. So if you remember from the study, we recommend realigning Danbury Forest Drive to line up with Wakefield Chapel Road to create a conventional 4-leg intersection. I've got my pointer. You'll have to forgive me. It's a little slow on your screen, so I'll try to move slow, and I can zoom in to give a little bit more detail. There was a study done maybe 10 or 15 years ago that also had a lot of community involvement, and this was the ultimate recommendation of that study for this intersection. So I'll zoom in here to show you. This is the current location of Danbury Forest Drive, this red hatching. So our proposal would be to relocate Danbury Forest Drive. This is the area where a bridge would be required to go over a Long Branch. And then there'd be a conventional signal here with the 4-leg intersection. Part of this also was to provide 2 left turn lanes on the Danbury Forest Drive and 2 left turn lanes on the Wakefield Chapel Road, which would require us to widen those roads to allow for receiving lanes, and we have to eventually merge back to 1 lane. The new proposal is what we call a combined R-cut and median U-turn. What it does is it replaces the 1 signal at Wakefield Chapel with a series of 3 signals. 1 at an R-cut at Danbury Forest in its existing location that would allow left turns in at a signal. The signal here at Wakefield Chapel Road, right here is Wakefield Chapel Road. And then a median U-turn also signalized east of Wakefield Chapel Road. The U-turn is for traffic accessing Wakefield Chapel or needing to get to Braddock Road westbound, because left turns would be prohibited at Wakefield Chapel Road and out of Danbury Forest Drive. And I'll review those in more detail now. So here's a close-up of Danbury Forest Drive. Wakefield Chapel's over here where the signal is to the right. As I mentioned, left turns would be prohibited, but it would allow for a left turn in with the signal. So you'll have a safe left turn in movement here. Also, right turns into Danbury Forest Drive will be allowed, as well as left turns out of Danbury Forest Drive. Moving to Wakefield Chapel Road, there'll be a signal here at Wakefield Chapel. As I mentioned, left turns would be prohibited. The traffic accessing Wakefield Chapel would need to go to the median U-turn, again signalized, turn right. We have a bulb out in this location here to allow larger trucks to make that turn movement, and then a right turn lane dedicated here for cars to then proceed on to Wakefield Chapel Wakefield Chapel Road and turn right. So I'm going to back up for a second to the larger view just to go over what Danbury Forest will have to do since there's no left turn. Danbury Forest traffic needing to access either Wakefield Chapel or Braddock Road westbound would turn right here. There's a signal so that you can turn right, get gaps to merge over, continue past Wakefield Chapel to the U-turn that I mentioned before. And again, this is signalized. Turn left and then continue on to either go straight on Braddock westbound or turn right onto Danbury Forest Drive. So now I'll go over the phasing signal timing operations of the 2 signals. But real quick, a phase is, you can look at, consider it like a movement, so like a through movement, a right turn or left turn movement. And the signal phasing is basically the order and the timing of those movements and how the signal operates. So the way the phasing works on the conventional intersection we proposed, it's a split signal. You don't need to know that, but that's what this type of phasing is called. The green arrows represent movements that would be going, and then the red lines with a perpendicular line represent movements that are not going. They basically have the red lights. So the first part of the cycle is your top left image here. The left turns from Braddock Road would turn left on the Wakefield Chapel and Danbury Forest Drive concurrently. Then the next part of the cycle would be the through movements on Braddock Road, then go. Third part of the cycle is Danbury Forest movements would go, left turn, right turn, and through onto Wakefield Chapel. Again, this is the study, so Danbury Forest is realigned with Wakefield Chapel Road. And then the fourth part of the cycle, the Wakefield Chapel Road traffic would then go. That would be through to Danbury Forest Drive and then right or left onto Braddock Road. One of the advantages of the proposal is even though it has 3 signals, they're coordinated and they work and function as one, and they actually only have 2 phases instead of the multi-phase operation I showed you for our original design. And the way this one works, if you look at the top image, phase 1, the through movements go on Braddock Road. And then for phase 2, basically the turning movements go. So I'll start here at Danbury. The left turn into Danbury is allowed to go. And at the same time, the right turns out of Danbury can go. Left and right turns out of Wakefield Chapel all go concurrently with those movements. In addition, at the same time, you can run the U-turns to then access Wakefield Chapel or Braddock Road westbound. And then you start back with the first phase with the through movements going. So basically by simplifying the phasing, it's a lot more efficient than the other operation because it's only 2 phases. We've also reduced our crossing points, crossing conflict points by more than 50%. Conflict points are points where vehicles either emerge or diverge or can cross each other. And crossing conflict points tend to be the ones that lead to the most serious accidents. So by reducing the amount of crossing conflicts by 50%, we're actually able to make the intersection safer. Another advantage of this design is it gives more green time available, mainline green time, which for here is Braddock Road because it's the major road. So it gives us 10 to 20% more green time, which just translates into more green signal for Braddock Road, allowing us to process traffic overall more efficiently. So the major advantages we see of this design are: 1, it does significantly reduce our environmental impacts. It reduces our impacts to parkland and reduces tree loss, as well as our impacts to waterways. It eliminates the bridge over Long Branch Creek for the relocated Danbury Forest Drive. It allows for more efficient pedestrian crossings by reducing the number of signal phases. And basically what that means is we can cross pedestrians with less conflict points for them and less opposing traffic they have to try to navigate. And then the total cost savings for this is $24 million, mostly by eliminating the relocation to Danbury Forest Drive, which eliminates that 4th leg of the intersection, eliminates the bridge as well. All right, so now I'll go on to talk about Port Royal Road and the I-495 ramps. This is the original design proposed with the study. We had proposed to actually eliminate the through movement from the southbound 495 ramp to Port Royal Road. So that's shown here on your screen with the red hatching again. So that movement that exists today, where you can come here and go straight on a Port Royal Road, was proposed to be eliminated. That was mostly because we needed more green time at the signal to process enough through traffic, because it was backing up the corridor if we didn't do that. So as part of that design, traffic to access Port Royal Road would have to stay on the off-ramp, go under Braddock Road. I'll try to follow the laser pointer here. And again, I apologize for the jagged nature of it. We added 2 left turn lanes at the opposite the signal for the HOV express lanes. So traffic to access Port Royal Road would have to come here, turn left, and then proceed to the signal at Port Royal Road from Braddock heading westbound and turn left again. So the new design, I'll walk through quickly, and then the next slide I'll go through in more detail. It proposes to keep the access to Port Royal Road open. It adds a shared right through lane along here after Port Royal Road to help with access to the 495 ramps, and that helps with our capacity, through capacity at Port Royal Road. We also proposed a signalizing the 495 southbound exit to Braddock Road East to help eliminate weaving, which helps with safety and with capacity on traffic going over the bridge. So on this next slide is the same thing in a little more detail. I'll just review it one more time. So again, the access to Port Royal Road from 495 southbound is retained. So you will still be able to come here, come off 495 and go straight on the Port Royal Road. Here is the additional lane. It's a shared right through lane. So traffic needing to go to 495 southbound can take the right here. But then if they need to go straight, they can continue straight without having to merge. And I think some of you experienced today where a lot of drivers get confused in this area and have to try to merge over really quickly, and that of course is a safety hazard and causes more delays. And then finally, changing the Braddock Road eastbound access from 495 southbound by signalize it with the existing signal here, so that they will have the signal to turn on to Braddock Road eastbound. And this will eliminate a lot of weaving and merging that goes on now, which will help with safety. In addition, will help increase traffic flow over the bridge. So the major benefits we see with this design are retaining the existing access to Port Royal Road. The shared right through lane on Braddock Road, as I mentioned, will help eliminate people getting over at the last minute and help with through traffic getting to 495 southbound and northbound. We can reduce the weaving and increase safety on the bridge by adding the signal for the southbound 495 ramp to eastbound Braddock Road. And our total cost savings here is $2 million. All right, so that's what the proposed design changes are. And then I'll go over the design operational analysis that was done. So VDOT's consultant, we gave them our traffic model. So we did a micro simulation, which is a very detailed traffic model as a part of our study. So VDOT's consultant, ATCS, took that model and did an analysis by putting in their design changes so they could compare it to what we had proposed. So let me walk through kind of what's shown on this slide first, and I'll go through the results. So what we have here on top, this slide is the AM, the next slide will be PM. These first graphs up top are the level of intersection delay analysis. It's called level of service, and what it does is measures the average number of seconds a vehicle has to wait at a signal. So the table we have here is the number of seconds a vehicle would have to wait. And then the dark gray bar are the results from our 2040 projections for our no build scenario, which is if we don't make any improvements at all. The light gray bar is what was proposed as part of our study. And then the blue bar is the intersection improvements proposed by VDOT's consultant. And then here we have the results at Braddock Road and Wakefield Chapel, at Braddock Road and Port Royal Road, and then Braddock Road and the Express Lamps ramp. So on this top graph, the higher the bar, the more delay, so the less efficient the intersection is. The two graphs we have down here are the vehicle throughput at the intersections for westbound and eastbound. And again, dark gray bar is the 2040 no build projections. The light gray bar is the projections with the improvements recommended from our study. And then the blue bar is projections with improvements recommended by VDOT's consultants. And in this graph, the larger the bar, the better, because more vehicles are getting through and being processed by the signal. So in the AM, what we generally see is equal to or better AM operations at the signals than the original concept we had as part of the study. And then we see significantly improved throughput at Wakefield Chapel, Danbury Forest, eastbound during the morning rush hour. And then here are the same tables for the PM. Our level of delay, intersection delay on top, and then the vehicle throughput at the bottom too. And then the PM, we find that we get equal to or better operations than our original concept, and then significantly improved throughput at all the locations westbound during the afternoon peak period. And then finally, I wanted to mention the pedestrian overpasses that have been proposed with the project. As we've always talked about the one at Kings Park Shopping Center, which is the image on the top. And that's part of phase 2. We had done some community outreach to discuss a potential second pedestrian overpass at Wakefield Chapel, Danbury Forest. And we talked about studying that further. So we will be studying that as part of phase 2, and pending the results, we will determine whether we would include that as part of phase 2 of the project. And then just as a reminder, I wanted to go over the pedestrian and bicycle improvements that are included as part of phase 1 of this project. We have shared use paths on both sides of the road leading up to 495. We have at-grade pedestrian crossings at all signalized intersections. And that includes pedestrian crossing signals as well. And then we'll be improving the underpass of the cross-county trail at Acatink Creek, where it goes under Braddock Road, and providing access from our shared use paths on each side of Braddock Road, and that will include ramps and stairs. So obviously we're here tonight to get your input on these proposed changes. As I mentioned, our overall goal is to increase the chance we can get funding so we can actually move to implementation of this project. As I mentioned, we feel the proposed changes maintain the benefits while actually increasing safety and significantly decreasing the cost. And as a result, they significantly increase our chances to get funding. And I think they're good recommendations. Actually, they stand pretty well on their own, even if we weren't trying to reduce the cost of the project, which of course we always are. So we'd like your input. The proposed changes would reduce the cost of phase 1 from 74 million to 48 million. We'll be getting ready to submit our smart scale application for phase 1, and that's due August 17th, in 2 weeks. Our staff recommendation is to proceed with the proposed design changes summarized in this presentation and include them in our Smart Scale application, but we'd like your input before we proceed. Our next steps for the project are to review public comments we get tonight and then at the survey. And as a reminder, those comments will be due August 10th. We'll finalize our Smart Scale application and submit that by August 17th. Moving forward, we will continue to apply for Smart Scale, MVTA, and other appropriate sources of funding for phase 1 as necessary and for phase 2. For VDOT, their next steps are to complete consultant selection and initiate the design. Here's VDOT's preliminary schedule. It calls for a preliminary engineering to design approval, which is 30% design of phases 1 and 2 to be completed in late spring 2022, with first citizens meetings roughly around spring 2021. And then the next major phase would be, or the final phases would be detailed engineering, land acquisition, and construction for phase 1, looking at construction in early 2025 through spring 2027. This does assume we get money for phase 1, and then the phase 2 schedule will be dependent on getting funding. So we'd like to hear from you. Our comment period closes August 10th. Again, that's a week from tonight, and that's so we can analyze the comments and have time to get our Smart Scale application in by the August 17th deadline. Here's our Braddock. This is our website where you can take the survey. There's also a comment form on there. You go to the red box at the bottom of the web page if you want to submit comments that way. You can submit comments to us in writing, or you can also always call. I also say if you do an internet search for Braddock Road multimodal improvements, that should take you to our project website. So with that, we will start the Q&A session. So I'll go over how to do that really quickly. So please use the Q&A function to type your questions for the moderators to read aloud. We ask that you do not use the chat feature to comment or ask questions. So some people may be joining us by phone, and we want to ensure that everyone can equally participate and hear all the questions. To access the Q&A function, hold your cursor over the screen and hit the Q&A button. If you don't see that, hold your cursor over the screen and click the button that's got 3 dots. And then you should see the Q&A function and select that. It should be the default, but make sure you select all panelists when entering your Q&A features. If you are joining us by phone, please push *3 to raise your hand, and that'll alert our host, Nick Alexandro, that you want to ask a question. When it's your turn, Nick will call on you to ask your question. He'll either call your name if it's available or the last 4 digits of your number. And then when you're done, please push *3 to unraise your hand. We plan to start with the written questions in the Q&A box first, and then reserve some time at the end if we have telephone questions. We've got a group of panelists available to answer your questions. We might be coordinating on who might answer a question, so if there is initial delay, just allow us time to coordinate that. So with that, hopefully we're getting some questions in. I'm going to leave this up on our screen for now, so you all can have time to write down comments. And then Nick, let's see if we have questions.
Yes, we have 11 questions so far, so we'll just go through these in order. The first one from Sean Newman: how would pedestrian crossings work at Danbury, Forest, and Wakefield Chapel?
Okay, let me go there real quick. All right, and one thing I do want to mention while I'm getting to that slide. Actually, you know what? I should do this later. So give me 1 second. One thing I want to mention that VDOT will be doing a detailed design as part of their design and detailed traffic analysis. So we will be going through all of these proposals in fine detail to really hash out if there's any issues and verifying that they will do the improvements that are shown so far with the results we have. So looking at phase 1, we can cross pedestrians on the side streets. Let me get my pointer on here. So we will be able to cross pedestrians at side streets during phase 1, so at Wakefield Chapel and Danbury Forest, and there'll be minimal turning conflicts for them. Then when we're on phase 2, So a crosswalk shown here at Wakefield Chapel, Danbury Forest. I'm sorry, at Wakefield Chapel. We can cross them with minimal conflicts. The only potential conflict is the right turn here, because they don't have to worry about turning movements from a realigned Danbury Forest Drive. That's basically how they would function. I know our proposed design, we only had one crossing here because we couldn't get enough green time. I'm hopeful we can revisit that with this new change and potentially get both legs of this, but we'll just have to wait and see until we get into detailed design.
Next question. Next question also from Sean Newman. How are these changes going to improve public transportation availability?
Okay. All right, so I would say these specific changes, other than helping with making it safer, helping a little bit with some of our pedestrian bicycle access along the corridor. I mean, it's really the project as a whole, I would say, that's improving those functions by providing the shared use paths, helping traffic flow along Braddock so that our buses also are moving along Braddock Road. We have looked at bus stop locations and have proposals to consolidate those stops to align with our signalized crossings and potential pedestrian overpasses. So really, I think the bike ped components and the traffic components of the project as we have it will help transit. And there's some other options we could possibly look at moving forward as well as we get into the detailed design. And I don't know if there's any of the panelists would like to join in and have some additional comments to add for that one.
This is Tom Bishoni. Just as part of the overall project, we will be upgrading the bus stops along the corridor throughout. So that isn't something that is specifically related to these changes, but it is part of the overall project.
Thank you, Tom. All right, Nick, next question.
Sure. From Ellen Egerton, will the signal operations go to an on-demand option?
All right, I'm not sure exactly what, I guess kind of dynamic signal timing. I know VDOT has done some pilot projects related to that. I think they did look at a stretch of Braddock along those lines. We are not planning that right now. The signal timing can be fairly complex where we've got multiple signal timings during the day, morning peak periods, afternoon peak periods, lunch rush. You can do different timings for Saturdays and Sundays. Right now, I'd say no plans for kind of on-demand dynamic timing, but that's something we can look at as we get through the design. And again, I'll throw that out to the panel, see if anyone else has something to add for that.
This is Nick. It could be, VDOT's timing plans do have sort of a free operation at night, and that may be what she's asking, where it's not necessarily on a cycle in the middle of the night. So that could be the interesting question.
And then that could be something we could bring up with VDOT and pursue during.
Yeah, and that really is VDOT's call. They do the signal timing plans throughout the county roadways.
Okay, great. All right, let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Jorge Tarico. These changes will only increase speeds. What are we doing to decrease auto-centric solutions?
Right. So yeah, we've heard that comment before. I think just maybe stepping back, big picture. One thing that I think was really good about the study, we started with looking at the comprehensive plan recommendations. Actually had HOV lanes from Berkeley Road to 495, and then a general purpose lane widening from Guinea to Berkeley Road. And we really tried to open that up and look at all types of options, including a non-widening option. And that ended up being kind of the most context sensitive with fairly similar traffic benefits to move traffic, while we thought balancing kind of concerns of the community and about the character of the neighborhood, making Braddock Road kind of more of a freeway, because I realize it is a heavily traveled road. You know, we have traffic on that road, and so we do want to be able to handle that. But we didn't just widen it or call for widening to increase capacity as much as possible. We tried to find a good solution so that traffic isn't so bad in 2040 or in the future. Our projections for our no-build scenario in 2040 were pretty dire. We had very significant travel time increases. What we found is the corridor basically is kind of near capacity now. So even though the corridor is expected to get fairly little growth over the next 15 to 20 years, just a little bit of traffic increase comparatively starts causing major delays. And then the other thing is that it was having major side street delays. So for residents along Braddock Road, what that means is during those peak periods, it's a lot of delays to get out of your neighborhood onto Braddock and get where you need to go. And then what we find too, kind of a third thing, is when corridors get at capacity and over capacity, you basically you get to a point where that's all the traffic you can process. And then if there's still demand, what you tend to see is your peak period sort of starts to grow. So instead of maybe it being really bad for an hour or hour and a half, that might translate to 2.5 hours. And so then it's just a longer period, kind of where I'd say the people who live along the corridor are somewhat more restricted in their movements. So your point's taken, just in sort of the philosophy of if we just keep improving roadways, it'll encourage more traffic. But I do think we did strike a balance of trying to meet the demand, but not just going to a standard widening and increasing the capacity as much as possible. And I'll just see if anyone on the panel wants to add to that. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Okay. I do not see crosswalks on all 4 sides of the intersection.
Right, so that is something, when we did our study, we were having a hard time getting the traffic to work. And this has actually been over recent years with our department, been a major point where we want crosswalks at all 4 legs of the intersection whenever possible. So we want that analyzed. And if there's any way possible to get crosswalks at all 4 legs, we will do that. As I mentioned, I'm hopeful with the proposed changes at Wakefield and Danbury, we can maybe get that 4th crosswalk leg in. We will be asking VDOT to look at that. Wherever we don't have 4 crosswalks, we want the traffic analysis to look at it to see if we can get it, and we will be pushing for that. It's a new point of emphasis with our department. So we'll be working with our partners at VDOT with that. The images you're seeing are from the study. We've doctored them up to show, or not we, the ATCS, VDOT consultant, did the graphics on the proposed changes so you all could see them. But you know, we haven't gone beyond basically that, what was like that level, what was proposed in the studies. That's when we get into design, and then we'll be able to come back out to you with VDOT with details on that, and then the exact details of what's proposed at each intersection.
Regarding the signaling, please give priority to pedestrians.
Understood. So at the very least, they have call buttons so that the pedestrians can activate it. You know, if that comment's going to trying to minimize the amount of delay, pedestrians have to wait, you know, we'll work with VDOT that. Part of this project is the shared use pass. It's been a major emphasis. When we really started looking at a non-widening option, these corridor and intersection improvements, we stressed throughout, and it was important to Supervisor Cook, and I know it's important to Supervisor Walkinshaw, that we maintain these bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and it's a major part. So we are including the shared use pass, and it's a major part of the project, not only for transportation, for commuters, but really for people for recreation, to get to destinations in the neighborhoods, give people a walking, biking access, and really help improve the neighborhood. So, and the signals are part of that. So that's a point duly noted.
What reduces crossing conflicts is decreased speeds, which allows people to react and behave less aggressively.
Right, point well taken. Like I said, we, based on the 2040 no build projections, we felt a no build was not a very good scenario. And so, again, we thought the corridor and intersection improvements was a good context-sensitive solution to address congestion, but also, help meet traffic demand as well. Tried to balance. We prioritize bicycles and pedestrians as well as the vehicles, but we do have to strike a balance between all the modes. Does any other panelists want to add to that? Okay, let's go to the next question.
Okay. Did you assess the level of service for people biking and walking in the corridor?
We have not done that as part of the study. We have not, frankly, actually talked about that. So we can with our after transportation team moving forward and maybe discuss that with VDOT. So that's a good comment. We'll make note of that. So Tad and Nick, if you can kind of note that down to something as one of our follow-ups, we can look into that. Those analysis do exist. Yeah.
All right, this is James Walkinger. I just wanted to jump in on that one. And one just a process suggestion here. It looks like we probably have more questions, although you're doing a great job getting through them. We'll have more than we can take. Maybe if we just, allow each person to have one question before we get through everyone else. There are some folks with multiple questions here. So Nick, if that's possible, maybe just give everyone one question and then move on to the next one. In terms of, I think it's a great point that, there would be some value in, a survey of bicyclists or folks or pedestrians in the corridor. I can just say right now, Sonia, I am a pedestrian or a runner sometimes in the corridor. I'd like to be a bicyclist. I need to get some air in my tires. But right now, you really cannot traverse the corridor by bicycle or on foot because the sidewalks stop and start. So you have one section of sidewalk on one side of Braddock Road and the next section on the other side of the Braddock Road. And one of the reasons, I'm so passionate about saving this project here is because I don't want to be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to have that still be the case. So this having the shared use paths on both sides of Braddock Road isn't just shared use paths, because right now for much of it, there's nothing, or there's an unsafe sidewalk that's right on the curb. So that is going to be a major improvement for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Thank you, Supervisor Walkinshaw. All right, so yeah, next, so maybe let's try to get some folks who haven't had one of their questions answered. And while Nick's working on that, I will point out that any questions, if we don't get to all the questions tonight, we will, we're able to download them from this meeting, and we'll work to get those posted on our website as soon as possible after tonight.
Okay, the next question is concerning the U-turn on eastbound Braddock Road, get to Wakefield Chapel Road.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes sees westbound backers with a Wakefield Chapel signal, so it's queuing back to the east along westbound Wakefield Chapel. So is a U-turn far enough downfield to enable those U-turns to go without being caught in that queue? That queue blocking that U-turn.
Right, I'm going there now. Okay, so right, so I'll just real quickly put the pointer on here. Yeah, that should be fine. And I'll point out first, we have a very long, for the U-turns, very long lane here for the U-turns to queue up. And then with this signal stopping traffic, for those U-turns, they will be able to in here get in the right turn lane. And for traffic going right on Braddock Road, they should be able to stack in here as well. That is a good point. Looking at the signal phasing, so if you look at phase 1 here, it's clearing a lot of the through traffic. And then when phase 2 starts, it stops traffic here, but it's, I'm probably moving my laser pointer too quick. So it's stopping traffic at Wakefield Chapel, but then it's also stopping traffic here at the U-turn signal. So that should give us a gap, and a gap enough for cars to make this movement and to queue up in these lanes. And again, this was analyzed by VDOT's consultant, but when they bring in their design consultant, this will all be looked at again. There'll be a traffic simulation done, and where we can look at this again and just verify all of that.
I just want to add that that packet is about 600 feet long, so we would accommodate at least 40 cars.
Yeah, thanks, Tad. That's Tad Brakowski. He's remember him, project manager from the study, and that's for the queue lane to do the U-turn, correct?
That's correct. Yep. That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Does anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, and I will add that we do recognize that there are backups, that there are queues going westbound at Wakefield Chapel, but with this design, there will be significantly more through time to be able to flush those queues.
Great, thanks, Nick. All right, let's go to the next question.
Okay. It appears as if solving for level of service results in solutions cater to solo driving situations. Measure is outdated. Does the county or VDOT consider reducing traffic volume as a success measure?
Well, with the study, we did look at HOV. We had a lot of problems with, since it's not a separated facility, with kind of weaving and merging traffic coming in and out of the HOV. And in the end, and it was widening as well. And so of the 3 options that we were focusing analysis on compared to the no build, the general purpose lane widening, HOV widening, and the intersection and corridor improvements, we went with the intersection and corridor improvements. At one point we were looking as part of the study as a transit center. There wasn't a lot of public support for that at the time, but that's something that could be revisited in the future. The county is constantly looking at our transit service to see what we can do to improve it, get people out of cars, ride sharing programs, working with businesses to help with carpooling, incentives, lots of programs we do. And I'll throw it out to the panel if anyone has anything to add for that.
Yeah, Michael, this is Tom Bishoni. I did want to just note that part of the reason, as Supervisor Walkinshaw mentioned, that we're connecting all the sidewalk segments and putting shared use paths on both sides is so that people won't feel that they need to get in the car, even if they want to take a short trip, just to the shopping center on either end of the corridor here. They can actually walk or bike to those activities or those retail locations or restaurants or whatever, so that they don't feel that they have to jump in the car. Today, for most of those trips, people are getting in their car because they can't walk or bike safely. So that is a major part of this particular project.
I could chime in on that. I mean, I think the challenge on Braddock Road is you have 2 kind of sets of vehicles. I mean, the reality is you have a lot of through traffic and people who are driving through essentially the neighborhoods of those of us who live there. And that's a challenge that we had to wrestle with in this project. But this will be a significant improvement in terms of getting cars off the road of those of us who live in the corridor, because right now it is just not really safe or feasible for us to walk or ride our bikes to the Kings Park Shopping Center, or in some instances, the Ravensworth Shopping Center at Port Royal. And we're not covering it all in this presentation, but I encourage folks to go back and look at the full plan that came out of the study. You'll see, for example, at Berkeley Road and Grantham, I believe, an improved pedestrian crossing, a hawk signal. Right now, there are families and pedestrians who are trying to cross from the Kings Park neighborhood just to get into the shopping center to go to Giant, and people are too scared to do it with their children, and that will be improved. So anyone, those of you who are raising concerns about what will this do in terms of pedestrian and bicyclists, I really encourage you to go look at the full study and plan, because we're only focusing on these two intersections here. For those of us who live in the corridor, it will be a significant improvement in terms of walking and biking. I think
Thank
we're
you,
for
Nick.
the next question.
Yep, sounds good. And real quick before we go to that, Nick, I just want to remind people when you ask your question, make sure you selected all panelists so that we all can see it. All right.
Okay. Are all of the other spot improvements included as originally conceived?
So the short answer is yes. The long answer to that is, and we did talk about this when we did our public outreach for the study. So we talked about that VDOT would be, or whoever at the time, whoever would be designing the project. At that time, it was the county or VDOT. But as VDOT does their design, they're going to redo the traffic analysis. We had a couple tricky points that we weren't, completely happy with our answers, but they're the best we could get that we'll revisit. And then the whole thing will be revisited. They'll be doing new traffic counts, new traffic projections, and they'll verify everything we did with the study. So what we might see is some tweaks to the intersections. Probably not as maybe significant as we're proposing tonight. These were a little more digging in, looking at alternative ways. But we might look at some things like that to reduce cost or provide better ways. But really more like if we propose dual left turn lanes at this intersection, maybe it'll be a single left turn lane or vice versa, just depending on the updated traffic analysis. What we won't have, though, is we won't come back with, well, we're going to design a general purpose lane widening versus the intersection and corridor improvement. So VDOT's committed to the concept and the preferred alternative, but some of the details and kind of the nitty gritty might get tweaked. So there might be some changes, but it'll be on that level of adjusting the turn lanes, some of the tweaks at the intersections versus a larger scale change of the concept and the design. And that's just the nature of updating design and doing a more detailed analysis. Right, does anyone else have anything to add to that? Okay.
The next question. The median U-turn arrangement seems clunky and unfamiliar in Virginia, more like a New Jersey jug handle. Are there other examples around to give us an idea of how smoothly this would work?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I am not thinking it. They definitely do exist and they're around. Does anyone on the panel know of anyone kind of in the median area?
There are actually several that are going to be implemented. We're looking at a couple of areas of Tyson's. We're also looking in the Richmond Highway corridor, and also some of the crossings of I-66 are going to be including these. So it is not going to be a unique feature for Northern Virginia. They're being looked at several locations.
Great. All right. Thank you, Tom. And one of the points we emphasize in the study is these, in general, these kinds of improvements were what allowed us to do the intersection and corridor improvements, because it gave us the additional capacity without having to widen the road. So I realize we had proposed a conventional intersection at Wakefield Chapel and Danbury Forest, but after looking at it again with VDOT's consultant, this is kind of in line with a lot of what we're doing in the corridor, where it increases safety compared to the conventional intersection, but also increases capacity.
And I'll add that it is a point of emphasis with VDOT to look at these innovative intersection ideas to improve safety and just operations, and that's been a fairly new thing over the last few years.
Yes, thanks, Nick.
And I'll move on to the next one. Does the new proposed configuration of Wakefield, Chapel, and Danbury Forest intersection reduce the overall cross-section?
Yes, it does. Let me bring that up. All right, so it does. So this is what is proposed. Bear with me 1 minute. Let me go back to our original proposal. So with this study, we proposed a conventional intersection like we talked about. As part of that, to handle the traffic, we proposed dual left turn lanes from Braddock Road to get onto Wakefield Chapel Road, as well as getting from Braddock on to Danbury Forest. And with dual left turn lanes, you have to then create 2 receiving lanes. So for each of those roads, we had to widen to allow 2 left turn lanes to get in. So there was a little bit of widening involved with traffic going out for the right turns or left turns coming out. But then we also had to widen for left turns going in. With the new design, we've got single lanes. So, and then, no left turn lane here at Wakefield Chapel, and then just a single left turn lane here going into Danbury Forest. So we no longer need to widen the kind of inbound, like Wakefield Chapel North or Danbury Forest Drive South because of that. So part of this concept does actually reduce the footprint of both of those roads. And that is one advantage in limiting disturbance. It's also an advantage in decreasing the cost.
Okay. Next question, what does VDOT consider in their benefit score in the smart scale application?
This is Tom Bishoni. So the VDOT has 6 different categories that they look at, and then they consolidate the benefits from those 6 categories. So the categories deal with congestion relief, they deal with economic development, they deal with safety. Those are 3 of the 6, and then they calculate a benefit, and then that benefit is divided by the cost. So the higher the cost, the lower that answer to that equation is going to be, and so that's one of the reasons we're trying to look at the ways to reduce the cost. Another one of the criteria is adjacent coordination with adjacent land use. So there's six different criteria that they use.
Thank you, Tom. And then as part of the pilot project, they look at those factors. And so with these improvements, as well as reducing the cost, maintaining the benefit, we're also increasing safety, which should also help improve our score.
All right. As this project is considering modifications to handle increased traffic volume, where have you incorporated quality of life components such as sound walls? Effectively, this will create sound impact to the neighboring communities.
Right. So we did look at that. So in this study, we didn't really look at sound walls, but VDOT, it's one of the elements VDOT added to the cost estimate, just to include it as something that might be considered on this corridor. It is something we did look at with our analysis. We did look at environmental impacts. We did try to do a noise analysis. One thing that happens with our 2040 no build, with lots of congestion, you have a lot of cars sitting, a lot of stopping and starting, which can add to pollution and noise. So there's a benefit to kind of keep the traffic moving, even though that seems a little counterintuitive. And also by not widening the road, we do help keep the traffic further away from the residents, especially those fronting or adjacent to Braddock Road. So we did look at that. Like I said, VDOT has added sound walls as an element in the cost estimate. So that's something that can be looked at. Obviously, that will involve a lot of community outreach. There's a certain character to the sound walls that I think you all will want to consider and how that affects the corridor and your neighborhoods. Then, of course, there also are advantages to them as well. So, so that will be looked at, and we will get into that. Does anyone want to add to that? Okay.
Next question, will the shared use paths be at grade or will they follow existing terrain? He is especially concerned about the north side of Braddock Road.
The plan is for the shared use paths to be at grade. If you look at the concept plans from the study, we do have grading limits for those. So generally they will come off kind of level with the curb and gutter and be at grade. That's the plan. But as we get into detailed design, we will look at what those impacts are. We did, I believe, have some retaining walls proposed to help limit the impacts in some critical areas where there was more of an elevation change. But again, we can get into all those details as VDOT does the detailed design.
Next question. The original project placed importance on the inclusion of a park and ride / bus transfer area. I suggest that a park and ride bus transfer project be included under the power lines on the south side of Braddock Road, opposite Glen Park Road.
So we can look at that. I know we do have some park and rides in the area. It's a good transit corridor. As you know, we were looking at building a new park and ride that was deferred to a future date. But we'll take that comment and we can get our transit planning folks involved and analyze that. Thank you.
This question is similar to one before, but we'll read it. In previous meetings, we have been told that the project has no consideration sound attenuation measures or neighborhood aesthetics. As FCDOT or VDOT be considered, both sound and appearance have direct impacts on the neighborhoods in close proximity.
So VDOT's policy is that they typically do not install sound walls. However, on federally funded projects, it is required to do a sound analysis and potentially provide sound walls as required by the federal regulations. So it'll all come down to if we get federal funding for this project. We are currently not planning to federalize this project, but as we've discussed tonight, we have been unsuccessful so far in getting the funding we need. So that may be something that comes down the road. So so sound walls aren't 100% off the table, but they're not 100% on the table either. And I don't think I can give you a kind of better answer than that at this stage right now. We'll just have to see where we go with the funding and as the project moves forward. And then I'll open that up to the panel, see if anyone else has some comments on that. Okay.
The next question, the second part of this appears to have gotten cut off, but I can read at least the first part. It's from the Friends of Accutane Creek. We applaud the decision not to build in the forested floodplain of Long Branch. We lament the overall replacement of, and unfortunately it cuts off. So ask that Philip Latas if he can retype that. Maybe we can get back to that second.
Right, and that's one advantage of the new design, but also we originally thought we could extend an existing culvert that was there that would have required getting into Long Branch a little bit too and relocation. So that's where we realized, or VDOT realized, they thought we couldn't extend the culvert. We'd have to put in that bridge. That bridge is a major cost element. So by eliminating that, or the proposal to eliminate relocating Danbury Forest Drive kind of just eliminates those potential issues there and kind of leaves the footprint a lot more like it is now. Okay.
Next question. Could you make the left lane on Braddock Road westbound as it approaches the left turn onto Berkeley Road a left-only lane and making the middle lane an option left or through lane to help more traffic get through to Berkeley?
So we've got, I encourage you to go to the project website to look at the study. We've got our proposal there. That is phase 2. So we will be getting into the design of that. This is something, we will download these comments. So Tad and Nick will take this comment and provide this to VDOT. I think some folks from VDOT are watching on tonight as well to see what we can do. We will be, I know some folks had some heartburn about what we propose with the study at that intersection. That is a critical intersection, so that'll be a major point of focus as we go through design with VDOT. And we'll look at that. But I would like to focus our comments tonight, if we can, on the proposed changes at Wakefield Chapel, Danbury Forest, and Port Royal, just so we make sure we get through all those and get our feedback so we can better inform our decision with our smart scale application. But you're welcome for these comments, submit these comments too, so we can pass them on to VDOT and know we need to facilitate addressing them with VDOT on the county side. But right now we don't have answers for that, but we can look at it.
Next question. What are the environmental impacts on Acatine Creek in the surrounding areas with the changes to Danbury Forest Drive? Can we access that info somewhere?
I'm sorry, Nick, do you mind reading that one again? I'm having a hard time finding where that one is.
Sure. What are the environmental impacts on Acatine Creek in the surrounding area with the changes to Danbury Forest Drive? Can we access that info somewhere?
All right, so let's go back. I got this slide up here. Let me go back. So in the study, when realigning, oh, it's actually, no, sorry, wrong spot. See if I have Acatine Creek on here. Since we're not widening, so Acatine Creek would be kind of over here. So since we're not widening, we're expecting to be fairly minimal. We're talking about improving the cross-county trail along Acatine Creek that goes under Braddock Road. Since we're not widening the road, though, we're not touching that structure. So the downside of that is we're limited in what we can do to improve the underpass. The clearance isn't great there. We're not going to really be able to raise it, or I mean, make a higher clearance because we're not touching the structure. But we'll improve it as much as we can. We'll provide access to the creek, to the trail, up and down. But since we're not widening, this option should have kind of the least amount of impacts. The proposal on the table, just kind of in the area at Danbury Forest Drive, if we leave that, it limits impacts kind of near Acatine Creek. I guess that's the answer I have. Does anyone on the panel have any other comments on that?
This is Ted again. Only thing we're doing up there is providing ramps, handicap ramps, and stairs for people to walk down to that underpass. And that's the extent of the disturbance we're going to have at that creek.
And then again, as we get into design with VDOT, we can really, have like just the real nuts and bolts of exactly what's going on in and around. That Ted mentioned is really just the ramps up and down from there. Okay.
Next question. What was the cost reduction in phase 1 as a result of not asking for pedestrian overpass in this phase?
For not doing the pedestrian overpass?
Specifically not asking for the overpass in phase 1. What was the cost reduction?
About 10 million when you add in all the contingencies and design. That reduces it by about $10 million. But again, we'll be doing our analysis and looking to see if we can include that as part of phase 2.
Yeah, Michael, on that point, it might be worth just talking a little bit about the potential schedules. Because I think sometimes we hear phase 1 and phase 2, and the idea it might sound like phase 2 is going to happen at some point far in the future. But my understanding is it's possible that the 2 phases could be constructed at the same time. We don't really know the construction schedule with phase 1 vis-a-vis phase 2. So, the pedestrian overpass, I felt like it makes sense to look at them both together in the same phase, but saying it's going to be considered in phase 2 isn't that we're pushing it off 20 years in the future or something.
Correct. And so the board has approved, as part of our funding plan, funding, or that we fund phase 1 and phase 2. So we're actively pursuing funding. We've got board approval to implement these projects. So our goal is to get money for phase 1 and phase 2, and best case scenario, we can construct them together. So that's a very good point. Thank you, Supervisor Walkinshaw. So, and even if we do a phased construction, we will want to do phase 2, if that's the second phase, like as quickly as possible. So that's a very good point. Phase 2 is not like a future 15, 20-year phase down the road. It'll be implemented as soon as we possibly can. And so, you know, if we get money for a phase 1 application, we will, next round of funding available, we will be putting out applications for phase 2 until we get the funding. So that's a very good point. Thank you.
How wide are the proposed travel and turn lanes on Braddock Road?
I'm sorry, Nick, can you say that again?
Sure. How wide are the proposed travel lanes and turn lanes on Braddock Road?
Ted, do you remember the lane widths we had? Again, that'll be all looked at again with VDOT.
Right. In the original proposal, they were 11 feet wide.
Right. So I think when we were at the intersections trying to add turn lanes, we went down to 11 feet to limit the impact. That also does have a benefit of helping calm traffic a little bit compared to 12 feet lanes. So I think that's something we will want to continue and pursue with VDOT. Okay.
Can you describe in detail the stream impacts that would result from the project at Danbury Forest?
Okay, so Ed, you might be a little more familiar with this. This image.
Right. The share use path will impact the parkland and impacts the creek, but not to the extent as we planned before. No, I don't think that the impacts be as great as what we had before.
This is Tom. So in the previous version of this, we were actually crossing the creek and it right at the intersection. There you go. Right. And so there were fairly significant impacts to the creek right there at the Danbury Forest and Braddock Road. Yeah. By realigning or leaving the Danbury Forest essentially where it is, the only impacts to the creek are through the widening, as Tad mentioned. So there's a significant reduction in the impacts to the creek.
Only thing we may have to do is extend the existing box culvert to provide the room for the share use path.
That would be over here.
Yeah.
And then again, as we get into more detailed design, we can. But as Tom mentioned, this location here is where a relocated Danbury Forest Drive would come in. As you can see, the creek here, there's actually it's all would be all on top of it. And so what we were proposing now with the updated concept, well, instead of extending a culvert, we would look at a bridge. But we still would be a lot of construction work in and around. Okay. Anybody else have anything to add on that?
All right. Next question. Is the project retaining the mid-block crossing of Braddock Road between Inver Chapel and Glen
Park? If it is unsignalized mid-block, we would not be keeping that.
Michael, your answer didn't come through. Can you restate what you said?
Yeah, if it's an unsignalized mid-block, we would not keep that. Do you remember at Inver Chapel?
I don't. I believe, by providing the share use path on both sides, we plan to direct the pedestrian to the intersections where they have safe crossings.
Right.
If I could jump in there, guys, the original study and task force report did show the maintenance of the mid-block crossing. So maybe we need to just take a look at that and get back to the question.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. I apologize. We'll do that. My apologies. Maybe I'm thinking mid-block is typically not at an intersection. Yeah, we'll follow up.
Yeah, there's an intersection. Inver Chapel is only on the southern side of Braddock Road, so mid-block isn't really the right phrase.
No worries. We'll verify that and post to answer that question on the website.
Next question. Will there still be a sidewalk from Braddock Road to Stalway Lane on the east side of Wakefield Chapel Road?
Yes, that's been discussed with previously that we will add that sidewalk as a part of the Braddock Road widening intersection improvement.
Right.
It doesn't show on this picture, but that plan is to add that sidewalk all the way up to the next intersection.
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, that is part of the project. It's not shown on this image, just because of how this image had to be created, just at the stage of the project line. That's a good question. Thank you.
Next question. While it was not part of the proposed redesigns, has there been any consideration for extending the merge lane from 495 north onto Braddock Road east? Currently, the merge lane forces traffic into the through lanes, which I assume is the same, like in terms of the traffic entering the North Springfield community.
We do have, we don't have that image here, but in the study we did, and Ted, you can maybe go into more detail, but we did plan some changes to that configuration to help eliminating that merging maneuver, getting on to Braddock eastbound and then immediately trying to get over to make the left turn on Ravensworth. So we've got a design as part of the study that will greatly eliminate that problem, we believe, and greatly improve it. And then, so I encourage you to look at the concept plans of the study at that end of the corridor, try and go over that. And again, as we come out with VDOT on the design, with their design, we can give more details on that. But we did look at change to that. Pat, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, we're providing a separation island between left turns and through traffic. So that would eliminate the weaving and provide more safety. And I believe that signal on top of the bridge would provide the gaps for people to get into the left turn bay.
Okay, thanks.
Next question. As you cross Port Royal Road eastbound, going eastbound on Braddock in the far right lane, you enter the shared through right turn lane or the right turn southbound turn lane, hoping to eliminate any possibility of weaving back to the city lane.
Sorry, I muted myself. That is correct. Let me go there. I believe what you're saying is right. And let me just zoom in on it. Okay, so here is Port Royal Road. And then this lane right here going eastbound on Braddock Road, this is the proposed shared right through lane, so that if a car is here and where today they would be in the right lane to go on the ramp for 490 southbound. If they realize they need to go straight or they don't want to go on the southbound exit, they can continue straight. There's the through lane here, where they can continue straight without having to jump over this other through line. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah. This is Ted again. What I like to add that used to be just 2 through lanes. So we are paving, we're adding additional lane between the exit ramp, the southbound I-495. We're adding a lane between that ramp and the bridge on our I-495. So we're adding another lane basically. Share.
Okay.
Okay. Next question. Will the U-turn traffic signal only be activated if there is a vehicle in that U-turn left turn lane?
So that, and Tad, Nick, chime in, but that will have vehicle detectors like all the signals do these days. So if there's no car there, it won't activate. However, looking at the signal phasing, because of the way it's phased, you know, you may not need the signal, but this traffic will still stop because it'll stop the through movements while it is allowing. So my laser pointer. So in this phase 2, when you're allowing the turning lanes and the movements to and from Wakefield and from Danbury, you basically get to allow this U-turn movement while these other movements are going. So it doesn't, so it wouldn't need to activate, but it probably would anyway, just because it's going to go concurrent with these. Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add on that. Maybe I'm slightly wrong.
Yeah, well, that's there'll be 3 signals, and they'll be coordinated. And the time, you know, they will you know, all those signals would provide ways of people entering the you know, Wakefield Chapel and Danbury forests. What I'm trying to say, the signals be coordinated.
Right. So and so they act as one. And I guess
Yes.
what I was trying to say, if you look at phase 1 up here, that's all the through movements, and then phase 2,
Yes.
all the through movements are stopped, and then all these green arrows are going. So, so while Wakefield's going, at the same time Danbury Forest traffic is going. Basically, and the U-turns are going. So even if there was nobody here, you're not adding more red time to Braddock Road, because that phase is just going concurrent with these other phases. So you'd have to have nobody at Wakefield or nobody at Danbury, either getting into Danbury or going out of Danbury, or vice versa, to not activate that cycle. So it kind of doesn't even need it, just because it overlaps with other phases.
I'd agree with that.
Okay, so hopefully that answers your question.
For the next question, looking at the VISM results comparison, there was a large improvement for intersection delay. However, the mainline throughputs were only slightly improved. Were signal timing improvements assumed in the no-build scenario?
Yes. So for the no build, they the way the model works, it just assumes optimal signal timing. So because that's what would happen in real life if you know, if a one phase became heavier, VDOT would be adjusting the signal timing to make it optimal, and they do that periodically at all the signals across the state and across the county. So yeah, we gave it the best shot scenario. I believe, Tad, correct me if I'm wrong, but even if there was like a heavy turn movement and we needed like additional turn lane capacity, did we assume that? Because we assumed that you'd have to do that shot improvement?
Yes, we did.
Yep.
Yes, we assume that. Yes. Correct.
So we try to give a realistic no build. So
Yeah.
not the major improvements, but if you know you needed to extend the right turn lane, we assume that improvement was done and signal timing was optimized. That's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, next question. The design and price projections for phase 2 impact getting funding for phase 1, or will phase 1 be awarded independently? There are expensive proposals in phase 2, such as a parking garage, which may not directly benefit those living along the Braddock Road corridor.
Right. So I guess first part of the question, overall, the price projections on both phases kind of led us to look at phasing the project to give us more flexibility, kind of assuming we would probably have to get the funding in multiple awards. Like I said, we felt strongly we needed to do the design together for both. And as Supervisor Walkinshaw mentioned, we'll be doing our best to get funding for both phases, and best case scenario, we build them together. As part of the study and the public involvement and work with the task force, the parking garage that was proposed that would have been part of phase 2 is no longer part of this project. So the recommendations that came out of the study were to not pursue it at this time, but noted we could pursue it in the future. But the future is not now. Future is kind of down the road, next generation of project. And so what we're doing now is phase 1, phase 2, intersection corridor improvements, but it does not include a new park and ride or a transit center that was studied as part of the study we did.
Next question. If a cyclist is trying to get from Wakefield Chapel to Danbury Forest, do they need to use the crosswalk, or will there be a safe way to get them from the turn lane, the Wakefield Chapel right turn lane onto Braddock, over to the left turn? Going straight at a crosswalk is counterintuitive when traffic is turning right onto Braddock.
All right. Okay. So Nick, I'm going to ask you to read that again, kind of while I bring in Nicholas up here. So do you mind reading the question again, Nick?
Yeah, I will. If a cyclist is trying to get from Wakefield Chapel, this is like southbound Wakefield Chapel, to Danbury Forest, will they need to use the crosswalk we propose there? Will there be a safe way to get from the right turn lane over to the left turn lane onto Danbury Forest? Going straight at the crosswalk is counterintuitive when traffic is turning right.
Right. So I think if you stayed on, if the cyclist were to stay on road, the options would be to follow the traffic. We'd have to look at that. I don't know if that's ideal or how comfortable that would be, and then use the signal. Another option as we have it right now would be to use the crosswalk and then the shared use path. So you could come across in the crosswalk, access the shared use path, then head over to Danbury Forest Drive, cross here, and then get back on the road as one option. But if you've got comments on that, we're happy to take them. You know, and we can look and see if we can improve that. But that would be under what we have right now. That would be the option. Tad or Nick, anything to add on that?
No, I would say that it'd be safer to use the crosswalk to cross and then use the share use path rather than mix with car traffic.
Right, and I know for all cyclists, that's not always an ideal situation, but you know, we can look at some of those fine details when we get into the design with VDOT.
Okay. There are two questions back to back, which are very similar and concern the area that we haven't discussed yet. So I'll ask both of them. Does the plan still include a Ravensworth Road widening? This widening would be very disruptive to this residential road. Next question is Ravensworth part of phase 1? Slide 6 indicates yes, but the rest of the presentation focuses only on Wakefield Chapel and Port Royal. Is proposed design unchanged for Ravensworth from the original study?
So yeah, short answer is yes, that is still proposed at Ravensworth. I think we had dual left turn lanes in, which was what was requiring the widening. Your point is noted. You know, we did adjust our design to shift it opposite the residences as much as possible on Ravensworth. And then that is, you know, is passed on to VDOT. And so we can get into that. VDOT will verify whether we need those dual left turn lanes or not, and if there's another way. So that's something we can look at design, but we're focusing tonight, like you said, on the proposed changes from the study that we want to include in our smart scale application. So what you don't see is not right now not changed from the study. But again, VDOT will be taking a second look, and we do know that that widening on Ravensworth was a concern for the community there.
And Michael, I think it's important to point out, because we've had a number of questions, you know, with folks concerned about or have questions about kind of other intersections or other aspects of the project. When the design that reaches an appropriate point for VDOT, we will have another series of community meetings to present those designs to you all and solicit your comments and feedback again. So if we weren't able to address your issue this evening that has to do with some of those areas outside of these two intersections, there will be extensive public outreach and opportunities to have input on that. I don't know exactly when that will be, but that will happen.
Right, yes. Yeah, I think, right now, like in spring 2021, VDOT thinks they'll have enough design done to start coming out with some, substantial or informative information on where they are with designs. And, the county, Tad, Nick, and I will still be involved as a project coordinating effort for the county, helping facilitate coordination with you all and Supervisor Walkinshaw. So we know there'll be a lot of outreach, and, a point of emphasis will be looking at what we did in the study, because the study involved a lot of community outreach. And if there's any significant changes like we are tonight, we will have public outreach and public involvement. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to do that as we move along in the project and VDOT starts design.
Next question. Necessitating that bikes operate as pedestrians to navigate intersections introduces more dangerous scenarios or interactions with cars.
Understood. I'll just say, we'll take your comment. We have an active transportation here in our group in DOT, County DOT. That's our bicycle pedestrian shared micromobility group. And we'll be working with them. We'll continue to work with them on this project. Understood. Sometimes we do recommend shared use path as the preferred facility. But I know for all cyclists, that isn't always the preferred option. So, we'll do our best. Right now, we've got shared use path, understanding that going off the roadway onto that isn't ideal for everybody. So we will look at that. We won't take the shared use paths away, but we'll look to see if there's treatments we can do, particularly at the intersections, that can improve the on-road bicycling experience. I'd say I don't have answers for you now, but we know that comment's out there. We'll look at that.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Nick, read this question in. We're getting to almost 20 minutes left, so I don't know if we have anyone who's phoned in on a question.
I have not seen anything.
Yeah, so I don't see anybody right now. So maybe if you, again, it's *3 to raise your hand if you're on the phone and you do have a question. So we'll keep going. Any of these posted comments we don't get to, we'll post responses on our website. If for some reason we don't get to a phone call question, please go to our website and post it, but we'll look for those raised hands and get to those if we see them. All right.
We've gotten to the first questions that everybody's had. I apologize if I didn't, but we're going to go back through for additional questions that for the people who have asked who've already had questions answered.
Great. All right. Thanks, Nick.
So will improving the underpass eliminate the mud that collects there under storms?
Probably not. I mean, we can look at, we'll look at the surface actually, so maybe we can do that. We've seen there that the creek obviously does raise up and we get some sediment deposit on that path. As I mentioned, when we realized we weren't going to touch that structure, we lost the opportunity to really kind of raise the elevation of the trail going in there, because the clearance isn't great as it is. But we'll look at what we could possibly do. We are somewhat limited since we're not replacing the bridge. We're kind of confined by what we have. So we're kind of stuck. But we'll see if there's some things we can do. But I think we're kind of stuck with existing conditions a little bit, just because we're not able to raise the height of the overpass. But we'll look at that again. But right now, I don't think we'll be able to do too much for that, unfortunately.
This is Ted. We were talking about installing some lighting under the bridge. So that's one thing that we were planned to do, installing the lighting.
Right, we are going to pursue that as our improvements there. Okay.
Next question. I support the new changes, but want to know if during this construction, can the forebay on the north of Braddock Road be constructed at the same time during the massive land disturbance already occurring?
I'll say
So,
maybe. No, go ahead. Did someone chime in?
Go ahead, Mike. I was just going to say, I think that question has to do with the Lake Accoting dredging. Is that how you're understanding it, Michael?
I'm not sure. Can you read the question again, Nick? Maybe I didn't catch that.
Sure. I support the new changes, but want to know if during this construction, can the forebay on the north of Braddock Road be constructed at the same time during the massive land disturbance already occurring?
Is that
So,
the Accoting?
I think
dredging? Okay.
I think that question is referring to the Accoting dredging, and it's a good point that there will not be a forebay as part of the Accoting dredging, but north of Braddock Road will likely be a point where the dredged spoils, the mud, will be deposited and dry and then trucked off. And I have asked the Park Authority and Public Works to make sure they're coordinating with DOT on the two projects. Right now, I would say in terms of timeline, depending on how long the permitting process takes, that the Accoting dredging is probably looking to be several years ahead of this project's schedule. But I have asked that it be considered in the planning. I don't know that they would be simultaneous, and I don't think we want to delay Accoting for a number of reasons. But it is important to consider both, because there will be transportation impacts from that project and the spoils being trucked off of that site. So we will definitely look at that, Michael. That's probably a good note for us to make, just to loop with Public Works and make sure they're on the same page as you are with this project.
Right. So we'll make that note. We'll do that. And yeah, it'll just all depend on the timing. If we're out there at the same time, we will need to coordinate it. I thought it was referring to construction phase, and I missed that part at the beginning. That'll be part of the design. We're not there yet on how we'll phase construction, but if there's any other ongoing projects or projects going on at the same time, we will coordinate this. That's a very good comment. Thank you.
Okay. We'd hoped that a new Danbury forest would have sidewalks to make it easier to get to and across Braddock. Any chance of that if we keep the existing location of Danbury Forest Drive?
Let's look at that. I don't believe that's in the scope right now, but let us take a look at that. That's one of the things we'll need to circle back if we move forward with the new design. So we'll make a note to look at that and work with VDOT on that and see if it makes sense to include a project like that in this project, or whether we would maybe pursue it as a separate county project to seek funding. But let us take a look at that and see what the impacts of our proposed changes would have. Pat or Nick, anything to add? Okay.
Next question, how is this a multimodal solution? The focus appears to be primarily on solo driving.
I would say, again, we've got shared use paths making connections to the underpass at Accoting Creek, pedestrian overpasses, hawk signals up near between Rolling and near St. Stephen's Church, a hawk signal at Grantham. Like I said, when it looked like the intersection corridor improvements, the non-widening option was gaining a lot of traction and was showing a lot of benefits, it was a real point of emphasis that we would include the shared use paths. So, I consider it multimodal because we're looking at access to transit. We are serving vehicles as well, but we're also doing our bicycle pedestrian facilities. So it doesn't exclude a vehicle component, but it does have the other component.
And again, and Mike mentioned this earlier, but in parts of the project that we aren't discussing tonight, pedestrian access to existing bus stops and new bus stops and newly located bus stops will be improved throughout the corridor. So it's not the topic tonight, but that is part of the project.
Right.
Okay.
Next question.
So, for piggyback on that, have you thought about transit as a way to score better in smart scale?
Yeah, I saw that one. So, we've got our improved access through the ped crossings, our shared use paths. So we do have that as part of the project. If we had a transit center as part of it, that would improve our score. So, I mean, we've included the improvements that we have under the scope of the project that we have. But we're not adding in, say, like the transit center back in as a way to try to improve the smart scale score. But in our applications, yeah, go ahead, Tom.
This is Tom. By allowing the traffic to flow better, the buses are going to flow better too. And so that is taken into account on the congestion relief portion of the scoring. And congestion relief is 45% of the total scoring. So that transit benefit, the ability for transit to move faster when the traffic is flowing as opposed to the stop and go conditions that exist today, would help with the smart scale score.
Thanks, Tom. Any other panelists want to add to that? Okay, thanks.
Next question, are there adequate bus shelters being planned with solar powered lights?
We will look into that. We'll be working with our bus stop team. I don't know right now. We'll look at them and see what shelters we have on the corridor and where ones might be needed. So we'll take that comment. Tad, we haven't talked about that in a while. Let's look at that and go back to what we had in the study and maybe get our transit folks to weigh back in. Shelters.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I believe we've mentioned something similar, but we can do it again. What about the other ingress and egress recommendations from subdivisions made in the original?
So they are all still the same. And for those who may not know what that means, that's part of the access management. So pretty much almost every intersection on the corridor that's not signalized, we called for some type of access management. Typically, it would be a left turn in or right in, right out, but a left turn would not be allowed out. So let me bring up the proposed R-cut, because that shows what that is, but it's without a signal. All right, so for the unsignalized intersections, typically we do some type of scenario like this. Again, no signal, where you can make a left turn in where you've got a turn lane to do it, but then the left turn out is blocked. And then you go right in, right out. So the idea is you would turn right and then have to U-turn to go the other way on Braddock Road, similar to what we have here with a signalized median U-turn. But in some cases, it's either unsignalized or you go to a existing signalized intersection to make that U-turn, or you might look for an alternative path. That was part of our access management. I know that was a point of concern of a lot of people on the corridor. We did do a lot of input on that. And generally find with access management, you can actually improve safety and increase capacity. And then those type of improvements are what really allowed us to have an option that didn't involve widening the road. We'll be revisiting all of that. We expect most of those to stay though with VDOT's design, but we'll have further public input on that. Excuse me. But right now, none of those have changed, just because VDOT hasn't gotten into that though. I do expect that most of those recommendations will carry through to VDOT's recommendation. But again, we'll have future public output on that.
Michael, if I could just jump in on that, that's obviously something that I've heard, some concerns from, from some neighborhoods that will be losing, their left turn onto Braddock. Those are movements that are probably unsafe now and get worse as the years go on. As Michael said, they probably will stay in the project because they're really necessary to getting the improvements we need. And if it makes anyone from those neighborhoods feel better, two of the neighborhoods that will be losing those left turns One is former Supervisor Cook's neighborhood in Kings Park at Kings Park Drive, and another is my neighborhood in Ravensworth Farm at Inver Chapel. So we're going to be in the same boat as everyone else, having to maybe change our routes from time to time.
All right, thank you. Any other panelists want to comment? I believe on the website there's a presentation from February. It's the second to last public meeting before we had the public outreach for the bridges. I think that one had some access management. Tad and Nick, let's see if we can point people in our what we post after this meeting on maybe one of our presentations that had some more details on access management. At one of our larger public meetings, we did talk about access management in more detail.
All right, next question. Many of the bus stops along the corridor have no safe way to cross Braddock to reach residences before embarking and after embarking. Will anything be done to improve these crossings for safety?
So like I said, at all signalized intersections, there'll be crosswalks, pedestrian signals. We are looking at locations of those bus stops and consolidation of bus stops to try to have them placed so we're not encouraging people to cross mid-block unsignalized. So we will be doing that, and we will revisit that. That was the plan, and we had that as part of the study, and we'll be doing that with VDOT as part of the design, and we'll look at that again and revisit that. But that's part of the project.
Okay. Is any of the plans financed by Fairfax County, or is this the state alone?
So the 11 million we have, the 5.5 we given to VDOT, that is county money, as some of the sources that the county does get, what we call local funds. So the county has put some money on, and the intention basically is to keep the project moving forward. So we've got enough to fund the 30% design, plus another 5.5 million to keep it moving. If we're unsuccessful in getting like this round of smart scale money, we'll look to find some more local money to keep the project moving forward. It is a challenge to fund the entire project locally, so that's why we're seeking these other funding sources, which typically is where we go for larger scale projects like this. Does anyone want to add to that? Okay, let's go to the next question.
It just says I would second the request for Hawker on-demand timing. It is safer to get the pedestrians through and out of the intersections.
Through and out of what, Nick? Sorry.
It is safer to get pedestrians through and out of the intersection.
Okay. Yep. So right now with the study, we got 2 Hawk signals proposed, as I mentioned before. That's a good comment. Thank you.
What about bus-only lanes during peak times to support bus travel time?
We really did not analyze that. You know, when we looked, I guess, on its own, we kind of talked about it as when we did the study when we were looking at the HOV. But with the traffic demands and what's in our comprehensive plan, we felt we really couldn't go to bus-only lanes. And again, with not widening with what we're proposing and what this project is, that would further kind of strain the corridor with the kind of existing and future traffic demand we're expecting.
And
So we
Michael,
didn't look at
Tom.
those for this quarter. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
You may want to talk about the fact that we did look at HOV, and
Right.
we started at HOV3, and we tried to look at HOV2 as well, and they didn't perform well. And that would have allowed, you know, specifically for buses, but overall it didn't perform well. You may want to mention.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry to interrupt. But yeah. So as part of the study, we looked at all kinds of options, and some of them were HOV lanes. We looked at a far left HOV lane, a far right HOV lane. I think the far left just caused too much weaving, and so we kind of ruled that out. So we looked at a far right HOV lane, and again, that would be the buses. We looked at HOV2. HOV3 with buses going in that lane. But what we found, that one performed okay. overall, but one of the big downsides is our side street delay just went through the roof. And so it was having a real negative impact on the neighborhoods. And then again, it just, the intersection and corridor improvements without the widening and still giving us a lot of the benefits just kind of rose to the top. And so the HOV wasn't eventually selected. And we did have a concern because so the side street delay, what I mean by that is like places like at Southampton, Port Royal, other signalized intersections along the corridor, the delays there were going up dramatically with that. And so that was why, that was one of the big downsides of those options. So not bus only lanes in themselves, but we didn't analyze it in HOV.
The thing I would add there, Michael, is I assume the question was in the context of adding a bus only lane, and the challenge that we have here in this corridor is it's pretty constrained and surrounded by residential neighborhoods on both the north and south of Braddock Road, some of which were built pretty close to the road. So once you started looking at adding lanes, whether that was a HOV lane, a toll lane, a general purpose lane, a bus only lane, you end up in people's backyards and right on their back deck pretty quickly. And obviously, as someone who represents all those neighborhoods, that would be pretty concerning to me. And that's just as true of a dedicated bus lane as it is the general purpose lane.
Very good point. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. Nick, I do see one hand raised now. So we have one caller. Why don't we make sure we get to that person?
Yes, I was gonna, yes. That person, we don't have the last 4 digits. We have the first 6 digits. So it is 703250 are your first 6 digits. So you are now unmuted to ask the question.
Michael, can you hear me?
Yes. Is that Kevin?
Yeah,
Good to hear from
Kevin. Thank you. I had the earlier question at Port Royal Road, and you maybe I didn't state it clearly enough. So eastbound on Braddock, you approach Port Royal Road intersection, you're in the far right lane. When you cross the intersection, are you in the right turn only lane for southbound 495, or are you in the shared lane where you can go right or through?
All right, let me zoom in there. All right. You know what? Let me go to this other one. So we're going eastbound.
Right.
On Braddock
Port Royal,
through Port
and you're
Royal.
in the far right lane.
Okay.
As if you were definitely trying to cheat and get up there as far as you could, like they do now.
I gotta go back.
So when you cross the intersection at Port Royal, does it under the new design, does it put you in the right turn only or in the shared right turn through lane? If it puts you in the shared lane, then there's no chance of weaving. If it puts you in the right turn, you'd still have that possibility.
Okay, let me, I'm sorry everybody for trying to get this. So if you're in this far right lane, yeah, where
that
I
lets
have
you
my
cross
hand,
the intersection.
right. That lines up with what I see here is it's lining up with the far right lane for the ramp. So to your point, if you're here, you would still need to merge over. So let us just confirm that with the graphic, but that does look what it looks like. So, and we could look at signage here potentially, some advanced signage, sort of say like through traffic and Braddock Road northbound, maybe in this lane, Braddock Road southbound in this lane. So that's a good comment. And so we'll take that to VDOT to look at that in a little more detail. And when we do the traffic analysis, we can look at it. But so to your point,
this is Tom. There's definitely going to need to be significant signage, probably in multiple locations, to make sure people are lined up in the right lanes as they approach the Port Royal intersection.
And Michael, before you that slide, I'll just go ahead, Kevin.
I'm sorry. The consultant had also recommended bumper, like you have now at Berkeley Road and Braddock, that type of the flexible barriers there is one possibility. And the other one that I had suggested for years is the colored shield emblems on the road as you approach the intersection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and while we have this slide up, because I think this is an important improvement, right now, for cars that are in the lane that's the 1, 2, 3rd from the bottom there, right now, as they go through the intersection, they end up in a situation where they actually have to go on the beltway from that lane. So you see folks at the last minute trying to merge over to the left because they don't want to get on the beltway. Under this configuration, anyone who's in that lane, even if you don't know what you're doing or where you're going, you have a choice to go onto the beltway or continue straight. So a lot of the weaving that we see right now is actually folks in that category, in the second lane from the right, which that problem will be eliminated under this configuration.
Well, I think there's still a shot that you could be, as you cross Port Royal, if you're in the most right lane that allows you to cross the intersection, that would still put you in the right turn only. And if you were cheating or you didn't know what you were doing, then you'd still have the weave back out.
So this is something we will definitely take back and spend some more time on. So thank you for raising the question.
Thanks for addressing it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so we're 9:02 now. Let me get back to our slides. So we're going to wrap this meeting up. Let me get back to our here we go. Okay. All right. So I want to thank everyone for coming. Just real quick, do any of our panelists want to make any closing remarks before we end?
I'll just thank everybody. I mean, we had a great turnout for this meeting, and I think got some really good feedback and suggestions and questions to take back to VDOT. So thank you everyone for participating, and to our FC DOT staff for working late tonight and putting a lot of time and effort into this. So Michael, thank you, Tom, and the entire team.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Walkinshaw. So just as a reminder, please go take the online survey on the project website for us. If you prefer to submit comments or want to submit comments, we have a feedback box on that page. All the information's here. We will be posting the presentation on the webpage. The PowerPoint's already up there. The survey's live. So if you want to do it right now, please do. If you'd like to do in writing, we have that option. If you'd like to call, you can do that as well. If you're doing it in writing, I'd ask you to please try to get that sent out soon so we can get it before August 10th. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Really good questions from the group, good turnout. Again, thank you for participation. Stay safe. I hope you all are doing well, and thank you for coming out tonight.
And thank you, Michael and Tad and the rest of the team. Excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So Eric didn't have to answer any questions. So
I did not. But you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank
so
you,
with
Michael.
that,
Great job.
thank you. I've stopped complimenting everybody. Okay. So with that, I think we'll end the meeting. So again, take that survey. If we didn't answer questions, we'll get those posted. If you're trying again and couldn't, please call or submit your comment and we'll get answers out to you. All right, so Nick, go ahead and meeting. You all have a good night. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.